All right, hello everyone. You're listening to You Got It with Warrior Woman 91. All right, so I do apologize. I know that you guys prefer episodes with guests on them, as I can see with the number of views that I get on guest episodes versus episodes where I'm just riffing, but both guests that I had been discussing having coming on the show had prior commitments, so hopefully we will have Paul Bois on next week. He had some other things come up and wasn't able to be on this week, and then the other guest I do hope to have on again. He was a repeat guest. You guys really enjoyed his episode as well, so we'll see who I can get on the show upcoming, but today, you've just got me, so sorry about that. It's just me. But I do have a couple things to talk about, because when I do solo episodes, I usually discuss things that I've been bombarded with on Twitter, and I think you guys saw I did have a back and forth with several very interesting gentlemen regarding the idea that women need to have children prior to the age of 30. Now, one of the things that gets thrown around is the statistics discussing, the statistics apparently show, and I'm going to kind of caveat this with, I haven't actually looked up the statistics. I'm just basing this conversation off of what I was presented on Twitter. If you guys want more in-depth well-researched discussion, then you might want to research it yourself. I'm just going to discuss what I was reading on Twitter today. So basically, what is said is that the statistics apparently show that women claim to be happier if they have their children prior to 30, and if they haven't had children by the time they're 30, or they haven't had any children after they turn 30, then they're statistically reported to be less happy. And I take issue with these statistics, number one, because which women are you asking? Because are you asking, like, a woman who is a single mother, for example? Are you asking a woman who is married to an abusive husband? Are you asking a woman who is married to her boyfriend who's never around? I don't know. It doesn't seem to make sense to me that every single woman who has had children prior to turning 30 is in necessarily the best position in life. So, like, you could have, I guess what I'm saying is, having a child does not necessarily mean that you are going to be happy. You could have a child and be happy with that child, but that's not going to make you happy by itself. And I also think that I think that this whole discussion is kind of based on a false premise, because if I lived my life just with the goal of being happy all the time, I wouldn't have done the majority of things that I've done in life that have been hard or difficult, or have put me in uncomfortable situations, or have been terrifying, or have been just, I used to be incredibly socially awkward when I was a teenager, especially in my younger teenage days. And now I'm hosting a podcast, and I am perfectly comfortable telling people what to do and giving orders and all the rest of it. So, things change, and the things that make you happy change. And my point is, really, just right now, if I was 10, 15 years younger, I would hate what I'm doing here. Like, I would hate having my voice recorded and broadcast to everybody else, because I would feel incredibly uncomfortable with it. There are things you have to do. How did I get from A to B? Well, I practiced, first of all. I used to do, a lot of my longtime fans remember, I used to do Periscope. Part of the reason why I was doing Periscope was to learn how to speak better on camera and be comfortable with it. And that doesn't mean that you're, like, on camera or on radio, uncomfortabilities or insecurities are going to go away entirely, but it does mean when the camera turns on or the microphone turns on, I can just snap my fingers and go now. Like, of course, I still, there's still stumblings and stutterings and all the rest of it, but in order to do crazy and amazing things, you have to do things that make you feel uncomfortable. So I just circling back on how I got on this rabbit trail is my statement that living life is not about being happy. So I think the standard of you will only be happy if you have a child before you are 30 and you're a woman. You will only be happy in that event. It's not worth it. Okay. Being happy is not my goal in life. So there's just kind of another point that I wanted to bring up in all of this, because I don't attribute necessarily bad intentions to all the men who are parroting these so-called statistics, because I think that men probably, and some women probably, have this preconceived notion that yes, of course you would be more happy, or really they would like this statistic to be true. They would like it to be true that women would be more happy if they had children younger. Whether that's because they think it's a societal benefit, or if they think that, that's the way things were done in the olden days and they would like things to go back that way, or if men just think that this is the best way to have it's a new pickup line. You won't be happy unless you have a child with me before you're 30, so we better make this happen right now. That's kind of how that comes off to me. It comes off to, I'm going to use this to manipulate you to do something, is basically how I feel about when people bring up these alleged statistics. Because, again, I still have not researched in depth these statistics, and I would question, which women are you asking? Because, again, you could have any number of anecdotal women who have 3 children, but their husband walked out on them, or their boyfriend walked out on them. They're single and they're struggling to pay the bills and all the rest of it. That's not ideal. And having a child prior to turning 30 didn't fix that. In fact, it was probably an irresponsible decision if you had a child with an irresponsible human being. So that comes to my other point. And this is, again, for all of you who are yelling at me on Twitter about this is how this comes across to me when somebody repeats and tries to drive home this argument that women need to have children before they're 30 or else. It comes off to me as, you better just find the first person you see on the street. You better go and marry them and have children right now. And it doesn't matter who it is. You completed the act of procreation, and so therefore you will automatically be happy. And if you don't do it, then you will be unhappy. You will be an unhappy old maid by the time you're 30. We've been hearing this for centuries, like the fear of being an old maid, being single post turning 30. Oh my gosh, this horrifying thing. Horrifying. It's not horrifying. And I'm not 30 yet, but I'm approaching 30. And I just don't think it's something that people ought to be placing fear in women over and pushing them into doing or making decisions that are irresponsible because they're afraid. Oh my gosh, if I don't do this by X date, somehow there's something wrong with me. My biological clock has run out and I will never have children. Oh my gosh. Again, anecdotal evidence, but I know plenty of people in their mid-30s and early 40s who have had children the natural way and no problems with that. Even if that's not the case, that you can't have children post-30, or that you have are not able to have children post-30, or if you're at a greater risk for disability for your child post-turning 30 or 35 or whatever the cutoff happens to be. You don't have to have children naturally. You can have a surrogate parent. You can adopt. There are plenty of different ways that you can go about this. It's not the be-all, end-all to do it the old-fashioned way. You don't have to do that. In fact, I think adoption is probably... it's on the same level. It literally is on the same level. I don't know why society seems to have these misconceptions about adoption, that somehow you're going to love your kids less because they didn't come from your own physiology or whatever it happens to be. Some of my best friends growing up were adopted. and some of the kids that I used to babysit when I was a teenager were adopted. And I always use this as an anecdotal example, but there was a family who they did have 3 biological children when they were younger, but they wanted to continue having children, and they were pretty affluent people, and you have to have some amount of money in order to adopt. And they decided not only that they were going to adopt, but that they were going to adopt girls from China, because those girls are more likely to be aborted or done away with. They're not likely to be adopted in any way because Chinese culture values males far more than females. This family that I use as my example of really what the standard of adoption should be, they decided not only were they going to adopt Chinese females that were cast off or thrown aside, they specifically said we are going to adopt children who have disabilities or health problems. And I think that really speaks highly of them for having done that. The first girl that they adopted, she had a heart condition. The second girl, they ended up adopting 5 more children in addition to the 3 that they had biologically. The second had a facial deformity. She had to have plastic surgery. The third, I think, had a stomach problem. The fourth had a skin condition, and the fifth did not have any conditions that I'm aware of. But she was a teenager, and she is, far less likely to get adopted when you're so significantly. When you're so much older than the average age of an adopted child. Most people want to adopt a baby over a teenager who's already going through the difficult stages of life, or one of the more difficult stages. So basically, that, I think, it's a lot less selfish than I can only have children the natural biological way, and only that will make me happy. And that kind of comes to another point. Just going back to this whole idea of the only way, the goal in life is apparently your own happiness. I don't think people have children simply because they want children to make them happy. Because it seems to me, and I'm not a parent, I'm single, and I probably will be that way until the day I die. But dealing with young kids as a babysitter, as an older sister, and dealing with pets also, sometimes you got to do things. In fact, a lot of times you got to do things that don't make you happy. Cleaning up after barf does not make me happy. Changing diapers for my friend's kid that I used to babysit, not the thing that I like to do. A lot of these things you do, and they don't make you happy necessarily, but you do them because it's more of a self-sacrificial kind of a thing. You do things that make yourself uncomfortable. And again, that doesn't feed into the statistic that certain people are happier than others because they made certain life decisions. You know what? I think that people need to make the life decisions that they decide are the most responsible decisions. I think that it's not a good argument to say you need to have children before you're 30 or you're going to be miserable. The better argument is you need to make the best and most responsible decisions for your own life, and if that involves having children, then fine. And if it doesn't, then you shouldn't be going around and pointing fingers at other people who've made decisions that are different, because it's not responsible for them to make that decision. It's kind of like, I see it in a lot of, again, I'm falling back on some anecdotes here, but I see it a lot there's half of my friends got married very young. We're talking 18, 19, 20 years old. And then the other half of my friends are like single for life kind of people. I have a few in between people that I'm friends with, but generally it's kind of in the extremes. And the two extremes, they don't hate each other, but they definitely judge each other a lot. So the women that had children early tend to be judgmental of the women who didn't have children early. They also tend to be insecure in that life decision, because they're like, well, people are making fun of me for having children early and for not getting a career. And then on the reverse, you've got the single women who are complaining, because they point fingers at the woman who had a child at 19, and they say, well, she didn't have a career, she's terrible. And then they also have this insecurity of, oh, I didn't have a child, maybe I'll never have one, so there's just this pointing of fingers and this back and forth. And I've really done my best, especially because I will admit I have fallen into the camp being the single person and seeing somebody who had children very young and thinking, well, that wouldn't have been my decision. And sometimes I've come off a little bit rude, and I feel bad about that. I ought not to have responded to other people like that, but I feel like that's one of the reasons why I can speak to this, because I absolutely see both sides of this situation with both my friends and just in my personal life. I just think that the real definition of feminism should not be, you need to live your life by statistics. You need to live your life based on this fear of your biological clock running out, and you'll never be happy unless you do X, Y, and Z. And then if somebody comes back with a counterpoint or say, I followed X, Y, and Z example and I'm still unhappy, well, then somehow that's how are statistics going to fix that? There isn't a be all to end all. There isn't a one size fixes all solution to this. You have to make decisions that are responsible, and decisions that make you responsible do not always make you happy. There are decisions that I have had to make that have made me deeply unhappy. There are decisions that I've had to make that have been emotionally and psychologically excruciating, and they were the right decisions to make. But I can see it especially now, but that doesn't mean that those decisions made me happy. That doesn't mean those decisions brought me any kind of joy out of it, but that doesn't make them the wrong decisions. And so my kind of tirade on this and my statements to the men who were going after me on Twitter talking about this, you really don't, at the end of the day, you really don't care about my happiness. If you're citing statistics and telling me I need to live my life by them, and telling me that I need to be one of those statistics, basically. I'm not a statistic. I am an individual, and I know all the different pieces in my own life, and I'm doing the best I can to move those pieces in the most responsible fashion possible. Not so that I can fit in with your statistic, or so that you can take pleasure in an activity. I'm making decisions to be responsible in the best way that I can. And that's not necessarily to say that I make responsible decisions all the time, but considering the way my life has gone, I think I've made quite a few responsible decisions. And that's probably a lot more than a lot of the guys tweeting at me can say. I might add in the most judgmental way I can possibly conjure. So, because I'm definitely not opposed to being a little judgy on this show. So that's my first little tirade on Twitter. I hope I've made myself clear. I know I've talked about this to a certain degree before when it comes to professions and what women should or shouldn't do with their professions, and this is just a subject that it really kind of irks me at the end of the day, because unfortunately it seems like there's a lot of conservatives and conservative men particularly that think that women need to do X, Y, and Z in their lives or they won't be happy. And I just kind of think, butt off, like butt out of my life, get out, don't tell me what to do. I'll make my decisions, you make your decisions, and we don't have to like them. Like, I don't like a lot of decisions that other people have made, and I can make commentary on that, but that's about it. Like, at the end of the day, make your own decision and make sure it's the responsible decision, not the decision that will fit you into a statistic or will make other people happy with the way your life is. Because I am certainly not going to make a decision about my own life because it'll make somebody else feel good. Like, it's not their life at the end of the day. Now, that's not to say that we don't make decisions that make us unhappy, or we don't do things that are selfless or self-sacrificing, but those need to be my decisions. Those can't be anybody else's decisions. So I could just go on and on about this. I've almost done an entire show on it. So what else is there to discuss? I'm recording this episode over the weekend when there were several mass shootings apparently in Texas. I did also want to comment on that. I do feel like, and again, I'm getting into the politics. I've said on previous episodes that I'm not doing politics, and I've done my best not to, but there are just some things that have come up that I do want to talk about, and so I will delve into it occasionally. I'm hoping that we'll be able to move away from it again in upcoming episodes, but this is not one of them, unfortunately. So there was a shooting in Texas, and or I think there were 2 mass shootings, and again, we kind of go through this cycle. Unfortunately, these are occurrences that are highly politicized every time they happen, and so I feel like they're actually made to feel like they're happening more often, because every single time one happens, it's blown up into this left versus right, take all the guns away or you're a hater, or how dare you take my guns away, you're a hater. And so it's just this back and forth. And I even tweeted about this. Every time there's a mass shooting, the media and the left come out and they say, we need to take all guns away. All you people who disagree with us, you're on the side of the mass shooter, basically, which is a really despicable and disgusting thing to say. But it's not like anybody really cares at this point anymore. And so I guess my point is, you know what's happening a lot, like all the time? People being killed en masse in the United States. Black-on-black crime. Like the right talks about this ad nauseum, but unfortunately ad nauseum doesn't seem to be enough anymore. Like, blacks in Chicago killing each other, it's far more, the murder rate is far more than any of these mass shootings. And that's not to downplay the gravity of a mass shooting, but it is to say that I would suggest, and I have been suggesting, that there is an extreme racial bias against black-on-black crime in Chicago, for example, and mass shootings that occur in white schools or in wealthy schools. Why are these mass shootings that occur in places where wealthy and elite people go to school, they're trumpeted over blacks in the inner cities killing each other? Why don't we care about this? And it really irritates me. All these people that call me racist and that call me hateful and bigoted, and I don't care about people getting killed. I care about people getting killed. I just don't care what color their skin is. And so my accusation is that people who turn a blind eye to blacks killing each other in the inner cities, yet trumpet these mass shootings as the worst thing that's ever happened. Again, I'm not saying that they're not terrible, but there is a bias in that, and I accuse those people of having some sort of soft form of racism in that, because you can't just care about the rich kids. You can't just care about the white kids. You need to care about the kids in the inner cities that are largely black, that are killing each other, and you don't care about that because that would go against the narrative, apparently. I'm just on fire today. I'm sorry. I'm out of control. If there are any questions people have about this episode, please leave them in the comments below. If there are any guests you want to hear, I am talking to Ben Shapiro's sister, Abby, about coming on my show. She's already said yes, but she's kind of in the middle of a move, a pretty extensive move. So that might not be until maybe next month, but definitely look out for that. Paul Bois, hopefully next week on next week's episode. I hope you guys really enjoyed last week's episode with Jacob Airy. I think that one was Jacob is just a joy to have on the show, really. We're really good friends from our experience at Daily Wire. And he's just a fantastic person. You ought to go follow him at Real Jacob Airy. He's a lot of fun to talk to, so definitely go and check that episode out. And if there's anything else you guys want me to discuss, whether it's political or if it's just, talking about my Minecraft experiences or talking about comic books or whatever it happens to be, please let me know in the comments. I really appreciate the support that people have been providing for the channel. And if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do that. Now, if you guys have made it through this little tirade about all of the things going on, coming up, I will say that my sister and I are going to try and shoot a video version of this show where we basically watch through The Last Jedi, and you guys get to watch it through with us, and we'll do some commentary on it. That might be coming up. We are going to try and shoot that on a day that I have makeup on my face. So we'll see if that one's coming up. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I will talk to you on the next episode.